And this is Ken Kraetzer in White Plains. They have a chance to visit with our Congresswoman Nita Lowey from the 17th District and covers northern Westchester, Rockland, parts of Ryan, Portchester. Congresswoman, great to see you as always.
It is always a pleasure, and I appreciate, Ken, your advocacy in behalf of all the men and women who are currently serving in very difficult circumstances around the world, and those men and women who come home and many of whom are homeless, don't have adequate support, but you're always there, and it's a pleasure for me to be here today.
Well, it's great for us to be able to work and support America's veterans. And Congresswoman Lowey, it's certainly been the year of women in the military. We see that at West Point all the time. 2 West Point graduates completed the Army Ranger course, and a young woman from Pelham graduated from West Point in May and is branching to the infantry. Certainly, opportunities for women have improved as all roles in the military have been open to women in the past year, but it certainly creates needs for health care, both for those serving today and for those who have served in the past. What are your thoughts about the needs of women in the military and also for women's health care for veterans?
Well, first of all, I'd like to remind all our listeners that one of the greatest honors I have as a member of Congress is appointing, with my nonpartisan Veterans Review Board, great young women and men to our nation's service academies. And in fact, I had the privilege of going up to West Point with one of my staff members a few years ago. And just to put a little humor into this interview, as we were driving up to West Point, she said to me, "It's Friday. I think you're going to get the same chicken cutlets that I've gotten for the last 25 years, ever since I've been there." And guess what? It was, and they weren't very good. So we were talking about improvements in the food at West Point. But what was so exciting to me is when they blow those trumpets, the bugles, and all of the West Point students, men and women, and many, many more women that I ever saw since my last visits, march out there. The procedure takes probably more time than it takes for them to gulp down all their food, but it's very exciting for me to see men and women making a decision to serve their country, and women have received many promotions, and according to all the people with whom I speak, they're doing a great job, so I'm very proud of that.
Absolutely. I think 22% of the freshman class, which is finishing up basic training as we speak, are women. So really a lot of leadership we see from the women at West Point, both academically and in athletics. One of the people we had a chance to meet from the Army was General Ken Tovo, who is the Lieutenant General Commander of Army Special Operations down at Yankee Stadium last week when he had a chance to throw a first pitch out. And I looked up at, his bio and sort of the recent history, and they'd had cutbacks in special forces, which surprised me. And I know part of that was due to the sequester a few years ago, which is still, we hear, is affecting the militaries. They're trying to catch up on the spending that they weren't able to make a couple of years ago. How do you feel the budget processing is going, and some of the priorities that you see for our military that really needs to be emphasized?
As the ranking member for the Democrats on appropriations, I work closely with Chairman Hal Rogers, and the process is outrageous, which is a kind way to describe it. We haven't completed our work. We've had many hearings. Ash Carter certainly represents the administration with distinction, comes before the committee, talks about its needs, talks about the urgency to get a budget passed. And it's sad, and I know we want to be bipartisan, but it is not a bipartisan issue these days, because the Republicans, with the sequester, just funded our brave men and women until April, and even that budget didn't pass. And when we asked what's going to happen after April, well, we'll see what happens after April. So the beginning of the fiscal year is October 1. We are currently in recess, and they, meaning the Republicans, are still playing games. And it pains me because when you meet our hardworking men and women in the services, when you speak to Ash Carter, when at the convention we heard from General Allen, and we know that so many of our brothers and sisters volunteer, go to serve, are well-trained, the fact that the military budget is part of the politics is an outrage.
Well, certainly a lot of priorities. One thing what you said, just going to throw this in, we see the tremendous emphasis on cyber defense now. We see it at West Point. We attended the cyber defense exercise they have there, and we hear about it all the time. I was at a West Point meeting with General Caslin where he said that's one of the top priorities at West Point is teaching the young cadets cyber defense, and certainly I know it's a very important part of all the military. What do you hear about in Washington?
Oh, I get classified briefings almost every week. And it's really kind of frightening to see what's going on. But I remember one of the generals giving me a briefing, and he said, just like in your private life, if you're online, you're going to get hacked. And if you have anything that you don't want the whole world to know about, don't go online, because there's no way that you can prevent people from hacking. And when you see these youngsters, 12, 13 years old, they know how to hack better than anybody. What concerns me, and I've spoken to many people who are responsible for hiring, training, recruiting in the military, is competition with the Googles and the Yahoos, and I'm constantly asking them whether this competition hurts their recruitment of some of the best. Are we paying enough? Are we appropriating enough money? So this is a challenge because cyber is the future. And when you think how an enemy could turn off our electricity, I could go on. Cyber is the challenge today. And one of the questions that I often ask when I meet with our members of the military or Radio Free Europe or so many who are in the Office of Diplomacy in the White House is, why can't we be more effective in combating the message of these criminals of ISIS who are recruiting women to be slaves, who are recruiting men to cut off people's head? Why can't we be more effective? We should be able to compete with ISIS on cyber militarily and also, frankly, through their messages that they are sending. The encryption of messages is particularly dangerous.
Absolutely. Hey, we had a chance to visit with the Commissioner of Veteran Services in New York City, Brigadier General Lori Sutton, who we saw on the podium at the convention, and we chatted at the Army birthday event in New York City in June. And she mentioned that one of the achievements in New York City is her work on alleviating veterans' homelessness. And she mentioned they had been validated as ending chronic veterans' homelessness in New York City. I know there's a lot left to be done, but I know that's a very important topic for you, and taking care of veterans who are homeless, certainly a number one priority in the veterans community. What more can be done that's not being done so far?
Well, we certainly should do more, although there has been some progress. And I have a beautiful story to tell you. I was up at the food bank in Westchester County, and members of the food bank of Rockland County, as you know, I represent Rockland and Westchester, were there as well. And a story of one of the volunteers who worked at the food bank with a veteran really made my heart feel good. When she first began visiting the veteran at home, no food in the house, nothing, zero, wasn't working, didn't have any relatives, didn't have any friends. In addition to bringing him food, they developed a relationship. She managed to encourage him to get into a veteran training program, and it took more than a year, but now he's a working man, buying his own food. But the issue of homelessness and veterans feeling alone, many have mental illness, and we are aware of it, but we have to do a lot more.
Absolutely. And another related topic, we do a lot of talks at Mercy College, their veterans program. Colonel Glenn Markey is running some outstanding programs for veterans there. And the concern we have is talk about cutbacks to the GI Bill, to the scholarship that's provided, to the stipend for living expenses. This has been a godsend to, I understand, over 500,000 veterans in recent years since it was passed with the assistance of so many in Congress and the veteran service organizations. What do you see are the keys to maintaining the GI Bill that has been so beneficial to recent veterans?
Now, I know this is not a political interview, but I would say vote Democrat, vote for Hillary Clinton, and you can delete this part of the interview if you care to. But it's really sad that those members, particularly those in the Freedom Caucus, so they call it in Washington, of the Republican Party, there are about 40 of them, and they profess to support veterans. They profess to care about those who are elderly and homeless and need support. But all they want to do is cut, cut, cut. And we have responsibilities as a citizen of the United States of America. And I remember the time when it was always bipartisan. We would work together, Democrats and Republicans, for our children, for education, for health care, our veterans, for our military. But when you have a group that just want to cut and the others weakly go along with them, there has to be a change. So I would just say, if we're closing this interview, that every citizen has a responsibility to our veterans, to those who have served our country with such distinction, and they have to be very careful about how they cast their vote. Number one, they have a responsibility to vote, and two, they have to vote for those who care about veterans, who care about those who need assistance, who care about the United States of America. It's still the greatest country in the world, and people would give their right arm to come here and be a citizen of the United States of America.
Absolutely. Congresswoman Nita Lowey, great to see you as always. Thank you for your support of our military members and veterans, and always good to see you.
Thank you very much, Ken, and thank you for your very important work. It's a pleasure to be here.
Appreciate that. This is Ken Kraetzer in White Plains for Sons of the American Legion Radio.